Hey, I'm Tyrean Martinson, and if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, it's my Fiction Friday Tyrean's Tales segment of the Truth About Storytelling. And if you're watching this on my Run Bull channel, you are simply watching Tyrean's Tales. And it's the part of my podcast and video content in which I share a short story or part of a novella or a novel that I've written. So today I will be reading a short story from 25 Impossible Tales of Survivors, Flawed Heroes, and Annoyed Villains, which is a science fiction and fantasy collection. Many of the stories in here are, I think, kind of general readership and can be read by younger people, like PG-13, PG type level writing. And then some of the stories are definitely headed more towards edgier adult audience. So most of what I've read so far has been what I consider more the general content. Today is maybe a little more PG-13 sort of, except for it's from the point of view of a woman telling a story to her child. And so most of the graphic details have been like taken out of the story, if you will. So ready to go? Again, remember this is told from the point of view of a mother telling a story to a child. The Blade Smith of Brin. I have never been a hero, no matter what stories you've heard. No, I don't have time to regale you with those tales. It's time for the young to get some sleep. What will I be doing? The forge is always best after dark. The cool night air relieves the sweltering heat of the forge, and at the right hour, the metal is at its best. I know you want to learn, but it isn't time. Not yet. Don't worry, your time will come. You must have a story? All right, just one, and a tiny cup of water, not much. And your Izzy Warrior doll. Yes, here it is. Now you ready? Good. Once upon a time, a young woman with fiery red hair. Yes, like your Izzy and you. Once upon a time, this young woman with fiery red hair imagined she would be the most gloriously good warrior the 10 kingdoms had ever seen. She would rid the world of dragons and other fell beasts, win wars against the evil enemies of her land, and gain the hand of a sweet and kind prince. What about handsome? Not all princes are handsome, and the kind ones are far better than the pretty ones. I know you don't understand that yet, but someday you will. Someday too soon, I fear. No, I'm not explaining what I mean by that. Not yet. Back to the story. When the young warrior woman with fiery red hair, we'll call her Scarlet for the sake of the story, when Scarlet rode out on her mighty steed to make her fortune, she didn't know the adventures she would have. There were many good adventures, many hard adventures, but the one I'm going to tell you about tonight, it was the most unexpected, the one that changed her life forever. Scarlet received a request from a king with sons. One prince was exceedingly handsome, and one prince was kind. If she could complete the king's request, he would give her half of his kingdom and the hand of the son she wanted. It was a more than generous reward for what seemed to be a simple quest. She was sent to retrieve the lost sword maker of Brin, the legendary Blade Smith who enchanted the swords of truth and power, along with many others. You've never heard of the sword maker of Brin? Well, the stories have passed as this new generation has placed importance on other things. Yes, we live in Britain. It does seem strange that no one has told you this tale, doesn't it? Perhaps there's a reason. Perhaps they've just forgotten. Perhaps they think it would be too hard to share. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. The quest to find the lost swordsmith of Brin and bring him home. Scarlet studied the legends. She read the maps. She searched the palace tapestries for clues and listened to the royal bards. The younger prince dogged her every step. The other avoided her. The kindly one warned her off the quest, tried to hide the clues she needed most. But the other one, the handsome one, he packed her bags for her when she announced she was ready to leave. The guard captain came to her in the middle of the night with a message for the lost swordsmith and a word of caution. She was being watched. It was all too strange, so she left a few hours before dawn, rode down the road out of the castle, and then, to the eyes of those who followed her, she disappeared. How could she disappear? Well, that I cannot tell you. There are some who say the greatest swordswomen and men gain their strength from sorcery. Some who claim warriors and warlocks always travel in pairs. The legends don't tell us which way it worked for Warrior Scarlet, only that she disappeared on the road and wasn't seen again by anyone of the kingdom of Brin. You don't like that ending? Well, don't worry. It's not the end. Not yet. Warrior Scarlet disappeared on the road, but Swordsmith Scarlet returned to Brin 10 years later. No, Warrior Scarlet and Swordsmith Scarlet may have been the same woman under the title, but inside, the woman Scarlet had been changed by her ordeal. In a way, she was a different woman, so the warrior was never seen again, but the swordsmith returned. Scarlet had completed her quest, just not in the expected way. That's a good question. What happened with the princes? The kindly one and the handsome one? Well, the king's health was failing. He had the coughing sickness 2 winters in a row before the swordsmith returned, and again, not the swordsmith he'd asked for. He didn't think he owed her the reward he'd promised. In fact, he didn't want her in his court at all. But she awed the people with her swordsmith skills right in the center of the city. Yes, that's where the swordsmith's fountain is today, to celebrate the wonder she produced with metal and magic. She produced 2 swords in one session of swordsmithing that lasted 2 days and 2 nights. She used the same bloom of steel for both swords, the same mixture of iron, carbon, and base sorcery. But in the forging and the making of each, the words cast over them, the way she worked the metal, she varied. When she was finished, she called one blade Mercy, and the other blade she called Justice. Yes, both of those swords belong to the king today. In fact, as she finished the last polish on the blade she called Justice, the king and his 2 sons had found their way to the square where she'd set up her forge. They shooed away all the common folk, or at least pushed them back far enough for royal comfort, with guards making a ring around the king on his litter, his sons, and swordsmith Scarlet. When she saw the king, she knelt, as is proper for royalty. The king asked her if he could test her swords, and she told him she had made the blades for the next king of Brin. Yes, there were 2 blades, 2 sons, only 1 throne. How could both blades be for just 1 son, 1 future king? The king wanted to know too. Swordsmith Scarlet told him the blades must be tested against one another. The prince who won the match would be crowned the next king, and would take care of the old king and his dotage. The king gazed at her, then at each of his sons in turn. Finally, he agreed. He asked which blade she would give to which son. She gave mercy to his eldest son, the handsome prince. She gave justice to the younger son, the kindly one. The elder son tried to argue with her. He felt mercy was only for the weak. Of course he was wrong. The king knew it. The younger son knew it. That's why the younger son offered to trade blades with his elder brother, if Swordsmith Scarlet would allow it. She bowed to him in acquiescence. The blades were exchanged. It would be a duel to first blood. Rules were given, seconds chosen. The princes, now men and not boys, took their positions. The king himself would preside as the judge of the match. The swordsmith took up a position on the opposite side of the ring as the counter-judge. The guard captain stood as third judge. The bout began with a show of force from the elder, handsome son. The younger prince, the kindly one, danced merrily away, his blade a blur of defense and parry. The conversation of their blades was at first uneven, with thunder and a trickle of small beats. But as they fought, the thunder quieted, and the small beats of rain on the steel hardened. Soon the sounds simmered into a steady rhythm. But this did not last for long. The elder started to tire. The younger became stronger. But unlike the kindly brother, the handsome one did not dance his blade like rain. He slopped his blade as his arm grew heavy. The younger one drew first blood on the elder. Yes, it happened that fast, but it felt like weeks had passed, not only to the brothers, but to all of those watching. The match had decided their fate. The younger would rule as king. The elder would help care for his father at a remote castle far from the center of the kingdom of Brin. But as the king bestowed his crown on the younger prince, the kindly one, the elder brother struck like swollen lightning, the thunder of his blade clanging only after he had beheaded his father. The younger brother blocked his brother's downward stroke, too late to save his father, but in time to save himself. The battle began again. The captain of the guards wanted to intervene, but Swordsmith Scarlet stopped him with her blades. Yes, she was still a warrior deep inside, and a swordsmith. As the princes fought, a knot of guards tended to the king's body. The other guards just kept the crowds back. The captain of the guards ceded to Scarlet. The brothers fought until both had ribbons of blood streaming from their royal clothes. The elder tired again as he had before. Eventually he fell to his knees, his head bowed. As the younger brother took a final swing, the older brother raised his blade, attempting a stop thrust into his brother's belly, but the younger brother enveloped the blade and forced it to the side with a skillful parry, which brought his own blade tip to his elder brother's throat. Yes, I know the elder prince lived. I didn't just listen to the story in history class, I lived it. Now, where was I? Yes, the elder prince, the younger prince, had his blade tip to his elder brother's throat, but unlike his older brother, he had a measure of self-control, a measure of mercy, as well as justice. With restraint, he merely nicked his brother's throat, but did not kill him. He took his brother's blade, mercy, and his own blade, justice, and handed them back to Swordsmith Scarlet as the guard captain arrested his brother. Swordsmith Scarlet picked up the crown. The prince knelt. She crowned him king. No, you know that doesn't happen. She didn't fall in love with him. He had to save his hand in marriage so he could make a match with royal Princess Valiti from the Tyrean kingdom, our queen. What happened to Swordsmith Scarlet? Well, she promised the new king, our king, she would make swords for his guards for 40 years and a day if he would give her the hand of his brother in marriage and a small piece of the kingdom. No, she didn't marry the elder prince, the traitor. There was another brother. the only one who opposed her once, who only helped her once. And no, I won't be telling you more tonight. It's quite a bit later than I planned. The forge will get too cool if I don't get there soon. I can't end it that way. I think I can end the story anywhere I want. I'm the storyteller. I get to make the rules of my story. Yes, it's my story. Yes, as I said, my story. Ah, you're getting clever. I guess you are almost old enough to join me at the forge. When you figure out the name and the role of the other brother, the third brother, I will let you pick out the iron for my next blade. When you know the name of your grandfather, I will let you stay up with me as the moon rises and the blade is forged in power. What am I working on tonight? Something to protect someone I love. Always questions. You're just going to have to figure it out, my little one. It's time for your sleep. Time for your test, your rest. I will be at my forge. Papa is downstairs keeping watch over the house. All will be well. Good night. And that ends the Blade Smith of Brin. As I was reading it, as always, I found something that I was like, oh, I wish I had done this instead, or, written something else. I had a few bobbly moments when I was reading, but I also found one singular mistake that I was like, oh no. But it is a story that I love, and I wrote it so long ago. And it was during a time where I was kind of doing some experimenting and playing with my writing and thinking about what it would be like to have a character tell their story to their child in kind of a bedtime story way, but with a little bit of testing back and forth with questions and answers. And I guess I picture the kid in the story who we don't really see at all, right? We just have this interesting monologue, basically, from the narrator of the story, who's actually the main character of the story. She's monologuing or telling the story to her child, and we're only hearing her part of the conversation. But I picture the child in the story being, I don't know, like 9, actually, still young enough that they really want to hear stories, and maybe they have a doll, but old enough that they really want to help at the forge, and they're starting to realize that the world is a bigger place than they knew, or they knew previously, or maybe even that their parents are not just their mom and dad. So maybe the kid's a little bit younger than that. Maybe they're 7 or 8. I don't know. I don't have a clear idea on how old the kid is, but I kind of did when I started the story. At first, I think I thought the kid was going to be younger, and then I aged him up as I was thinking about through the story, because she does tell. It is a little more PG-13 than PG with the sword fighting and the beheading of the king. But I do think fairy tales can be like that. There can be some pretty big, heavy details in some fairy tales. And this was supposed to kind of feel like a fairy tale, sort of like a bedtime story type thing. And yeah, I had a lot of fun writing it. But what's interesting about this story, it was in a file folder on my computer, and I had saved it, but I kind of forgotten about it. Like, I wrote it, I think, before I even put my first short story collection together in like 2015 or so. And so it made it into this one, mainly because I was searching through old files and I found it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right, that story. And I remember really loving the story, and I remember sending it out to places, and I didn't get it picked up by any publications because it is kind of an odd story, really. It's told from the point of view of the narrator. It's a sweeter version than an Edgar Allan Poe story. If you've ever read an Edgar Allan Poe story, and the narrator is kind of the main character in the story, and the narrator's maybe not quite trustworthy. So, in a lot of Edgar Allan Poe stories, that's true. In this story, The Blade Smith of Brin, the main character is, I guess you could say, trustworthy, but she's not sharing all the details, partly because she's telling the story to her child, and partly because she's kind of holding her identity, her true identity, um, somewhat privately, like somewhat close to her vest. And there's a part in there where the kid says, "Oh, I never heard this story before." And it's because I guess this is one of those weird, like, I start creating a backstory for these characters, even if they're only a short story. I imagine that this woman, even though many people in her kingdom know who she has asked to live a private life. And so she is the Blade Smith of Brin, but she's doing this in an area that's kind of separate from the capital city of the kingdom. And she's trying to live a fairly private life with her husband and her child. And so anyway, so it's just again, when I write a short story, there's a whole lot that goes into it that's not on the page in the story. And I often think I should come back to these characters and write a book for them, because that's how much thinking I put into the world building in so many ways. So anyway, I hope you liked this story and enjoyed a little bit of behind the scenes about it. And I will see you next time. Thanks.